Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. We just hit 28.2k subs. Can we get to 29k by the end of the month? Please like this video down below and subscribe before we get started. But now let's get started. Of course, as expected, I've gotten a lot of backlash over my last Bernie Sanders prediction video, and people just don't seem to understand that there are actual reasons why Bernie Sanders is not going to be able to win the presidency in 2020, and we're going to dive into this in just a second and try to prove to people that he's not necessarily this FDR-style savior of the country like a lot of his fans think. And by the way, FDR is a terrible president in my opinion for other reasons I'm not going to discuss in this video. But Bernie Sanders is not going to be able to win, let alone win in a landslide. You have Democrats saying, oh, Bernie's going to win West Virginia, Bernie's going to win Kentucky, Bernie's going to win Oklahoma, and all this kind of stuff. Just shut up, please. We don't care about your nonsense. It's not going to happen. You're cringe. It's just enough. The guy is nuts. I think we all know that. And I'm going to tell you 10 reasons why. So guys, the first reason why Bernie is not going to be able to beat Trump is that socialism is unpopular. This guy is a self-described socialist. Then you get in with his fans and they're like, oh, he's a social democrat. It's not how it works. He self-identifies as a democratic socialist. He very well aligns more so to the Democrat Socialists of America platform, especially when it comes to things like wealth redistribution and socializing industries than actual social democracies in Europe that are roughly center-left, places like Norway and Denmark, which have actually come out and denounced Bernie Sanders, saying that they are far from socialist, actually very high on the economic freedom axis. But by the way, recent polling data from Fox shows that socialism has a net -23 rating and capitalism has a net positive 30 rating in terms of percentage. And a lot of American families came from fleeing socialism to become entrepreneurs in America. So a lot of Americans enjoy their economic freedom. Bernie's plans are anti-market. Honestly, in my opinion, and a lot of Republicans and independents and even some Democrats voters' opinions, his plans are anti-American. And the DNC, by the way, the DNC knows this. They prevented him from winning the nomination because they know he could not have beaten Trump. I don't care what the polls say. The polls are inaccurate this far out. They have not matched up. Michael Bloomberg actually put it perfectly at the debate. The polls are not the election. A lot of people in the election community seem not to understand this, which is absolutely hilarious. We are far out from the election. A lot can happen, and a lot will happen that aren't necessarily reflected in the current data, but that's beside the point. But honestly, I don't believe Bernie is really suited for dog catcher outside of senator from his lunatic state of Vermont, by the way, just saying. And by the way, the average voter in this country is around 55 years old. So the people that are talking about the argument of him boosting youth turnout, well, I mean, it's actually a very big white pill that he would have to raise the youth voter turnout by like 35 to 40% in order to make up for lost ground. And that's not even a sure thing, by the way, that he would actually do better than Hillary Clinton with youth voters when it's all said and done. Yeah, we've got a lot of dumb people in this generation, but we also have a lot of smart people, myself included. The big brain brigade is here, and we are actually pushing conservatism, traditional conservatism forward, just doing it behind the scenes. We just don't like to talk about it a whole lot because we know exactly what kind of backlash that you guys are going to give us. And now I have a second reason here that I'll get to in depth, is that Bernie Sanders wants to raise your taxes. This is not something good. He comes out and he's like, oh, Donald Trump is only good. He's only lowering for the 1%. That's not true. In fact, of course, he lowers it for the 1% because the 1%, like he says, they do own a disproportionate amount of wealth, but they also pay a very disproportionate amount of taxes. So any tax cut is ultimately going to impact them probably the most, but it also impacts people in the middle class, and they see it in their paycheck. They see the money rolling back, which Bernie actually wants to take away. I did this for my channel. Bernie would actually cause me to lose over $1,000 a year based on my revenue, and as my revenue increases, that's going to be even more money I'm going to lose thanks to Bernie Sanders. By the way, I have private health care. It's cheap and it works fine. I know our system's not perfect, but that, again, we'll get to that later. But workers making above $29,000 are going to see their taxes being raised significantly. This is going to raise the cost of living significantly in the process. In fact, a lot of people just don't want to pay more in taxes for government to provide them things. Again, you keep taxing, you keep taking money away, you keep giving programs to people. Eventually, it's kind of turning into some sort of Marxist, communist-like type of system where they just give you, the government basically hands you certain parts of the means of production, and you're struggling, everyone's struggling. Remember, Bernie said, oh, bread lines, we're going to take all the money from the rich and give everybody a piece of bread. By the way, we have things like bread lines in capitalist systems for people that can't afford it, Bernie. They're called soup kitchens. And by the way, you can buy bread very cheaply. Even homeless people can afford bread. So I don't want to hear that argument coming from the left either. But the minimum wage is another thing that this is also going to be detrimental, and this kind of goes into the raising of the taxes. Because you take the $15 minimum wage, if you work that full time, you're going to see a tax increase too. And if you do all the math, it's going to be lower to about $10 an hour or so, a little bit more than that, varies by state. And you're going to see cost of living increases, like things like rent's going to go up, basic needs are going to go up. So it's actually a very regressive type of tax structure in the long run that Bernie Sanders wants to incorporate into America. And we don't really like that here. A lot of people actually would rather keep our low taxes, and we'd rather be able to keep our economic freedom and maybe work a market-based healthcare system. But raising taxes, raising people's taxes is very, very, very unpopular. It's probably, I don't have a significant poll on this, but I would assume that most Americans do not want their taxes raised, and more Americans don't want their taxes raised than Americans that want to be on free government health care. I'm just going to say this. So Bernie's not going to be able to win if he's going to raise your taxes significantly. All right, now let's get to number three. Number three is pipe dream plans cost way too much. And most people know this and most people understand this. They're going to bankrupt the country, and they're basically going to bankrupt you in the process. The total cost of free college, housing, healthcare, the Green New Deal, it's going to cost us over a net $60 trillion in 10 years. And that's a minimum. That's going off of Bernie's website. And he can only basically come up with 35 to 40, maybe 45% of that at most. That's the math on his website that he shows. I saw a great video out of Nuance Bro earlier today that basically broke it down very, very well. And look, most of these plans are actually underwater. You have the leftists, they say 70% of Americans want things like the Green New Deal and things like Medicare for all, but actually even only 57% of Democrats want Medicare for all out of the exit polls for the first two states. I think in Nevada it was like 61, and Bernie did very well in that state. He probably won't do as well in every single state as he did in Nevada, so I would estimate the number of Democrats that want Medicare for all somewhere in the mid to high 50s. So obviously it's not at 70% of Republicans, by the way. And by the way, the 60 trillion figure doesn't incorporate the actual estimates out of the Green New Deal. And some of the studies, they're basically saying all studies that disagree with me are right-wing studies, right-leaning studies. But actually, I would assume that the Green New Deal would cost, I think most studies have that at like $90 trillion over the next 10 years. So it's probably going to be a lot more than 60 trillion. 60 trillion is a very conservative estimate. And look, we are already $23 trillion in debt. And obviously, I'm not going to say Donald Trump is innocent because then I'd be lying to you. But look, we are going to be ultimately destroyed in comparison with Bernie Sanders. He will further plunge this country into debt if he enacts his policies as president. And that kind of brings us to number 4. His change in policies are going to be very unpopular to such a strong economy. The economy we have now, by most metrics, is the best it's been in our entire lifetimes. And it's gotten much, much better under Donald Trump. All Bernie's going to come up is he's going to provide the snake oil and drive a knife into the healthy economy. And he's lying at the debates, by the way. He's making it seem like this economy's only work for the top 1%, saying, oh, the stock market's good for the 1%. Over half of Americans, I think 55% own stocks, by the way. 55% of Americans own stocks. The stock market is up. That's your 401ks, all of your IRAs and stuff like that. That's all up. So the economy is doing very well. Also, under Trump's tax plan, the lower income brackets, their wages are rising faster than the top 1%, according to the study out of Indeed. So basically, from that, Trump is already incorporating this so-called income inequality thing into his campaign, and it's going to work for him because he's actually produced results when it comes to this free market, low tax results. American freedom, the big red, white, and blue, it's actually working for us better than Bernie. And honestly, unions are being fed up with Bernie. The unions are being disillusioned with Bernie Sanders and all of his big taxes, the big healthcare types of stuff that's happening, all of the big tax increases that you'll have to see to pay for all this stuff. So basically, I think a lot of Americans are going to keep their freedom. You have the Democrats that talk about, oh, but Sweden, the Scandinavia model's the best. But Scandinavians living in America have a better standard of living than Scandinavians living in Scandinavia. I kind of wonder why that is. Probably because of the free market. That's probably exactly what's keeping America afloat. That's what made America great in the first place. So by the way, it's the way it is. But now we go to number 5, why Bernie can't win. Bernie has little-known skeletons in his closet. Now, these are little tidbits that could sink his campaign or turn off potential independent voters. Especially among women, Bernie wrote an essay. He used to write porn, by the way. He wrote a porn essay on women. He said women are being fantasized about being raped. He wrote a big graphic essay on it. That's kind of creepy if you ask me. And he voted to dump Vermont's nuclear waste into a poor Latino community near El Paso, Texas. A lot of people don't know that either. And by the way, Donald Trump and the Republicans and all the anti-Bernie people, they're not going to let us forget about these things. These things could be detrimental to Bernie. That's kind of how it's going to go down, especially in the divisive discourse we have today, that these things are going to cause people to turn away from Bernie as well. Number 6 is also another little thing that's this one of these skeleton in the closet type of things. He didn't have a job until he was 40. He lived off the system. He would go to protests and was a freelance porn writer, basically. So he lived off the system. He was a lazy bum for half of his entire life. In comparison, Trump led a major company. He worked with the blue-collar people at the bottom, the white-collar people at the top, and he got things done. He turned millions of dollars into billions of dollars, and actually, contrary to popular belief, was a pretty good businessman. In fact, he actually had many more successes than he had failures, just saying. That's the way it is. And number 7 is that Bernie Sanders doesn't appear to have a religion or believe in God. And Bernie, he was raised Jewish, but he does not practice Judaism. He basically claims that he's an agnostic. He says some stuff like, we're all in this together. And that this stuff is not going to energize or win back these evangelical Christian voters that Democrats have been siphoning away for years and years and years. And socialism, a lot of people see it as something that is theft. A lot of people see taxation as theft. A lot of people are going to see this as a detriment to the churches, which provide a lot of private charity. They're going to probably be run out of business. And you have a lot of religious people in the South, places like Georgia, North Carolina. You're going to turn off a lot of black voters. There's a reason why Bernie Sanders is struggling in the southern states among southern black voters. It's basically because there's no real religious element to him. I don't even think he's gone to the churches and stuff like that. Donald Trump actually made an effort, and he's going to continue making an effort to go to churches, both black and white in the South, and he's going to continue on to build with his momentum. And he's going to be able to beat Bernie Sanders, especially among religious voters. Bernie Sanders, I mean, the guy wants... Are we even talking about these things? Like, we're not even mentioning things like partial birth abortion that are so much like infanticide that Bernie Sanders supports. These things are basically immoral. That's not going to get him the South. It's not going to get him Georgia. He's already lost Florida because of the Cuban thing we'll get to in a second. And the Rust Belt's not going to vote for him because he basically did not come out and he did not support any of the trade deals, USMCA, things like he talked about restructuring NAFTA, and when push comes to shove, he didn't even vote for it. So, hey, he's kind of a hypocrite in a lot of ways, but that's just his personality, I guess. Number 8. This one is probably, in terms of electoral possibility for victory, the most detrimental, especially in swing states. His preferred candidates failed miserably in the blue wave year of 2018. They went 0 for 40, the Justice Dems, 0 for 40 in swing districts, missing out on things like potential clear pickups like Nebraska's 2nd district. It actually trended, I believe, heavily in the R column over 2016, which was very interesting to me. And I wondered why that was. It's because they put out the crazy nutso leftist in there, and, well, they lost. And again, if Bernie does the same thing, if Bernie's the nominee, Democrats nominate him, they know that they're going to lose. They probably are just going to cut their losses when he automatically wins the nomination. They'll probably pull funding out of his campaign because they know he cannot win at all. So number 9. This is kind of other stuff that we're hearing about over the past few weeks or so. He's got a history of fetishizing socialist and communist dictators. This guy honeymooned in the Soviet Union. He hung the USSR flag up in his office, and he constantly praised aspects about the communist Soviet Union. He praised Chavez down in Venezuela a few years ago, right before the Venezuelan socialism destroyed Venezuela. He praised Fidel Castro this week, talking about literacy programs. It's like, does he not even understand the fact literacy programs were actually put into place in order for people to be able to understand the government propaganda they were putting out? So it's hilariously just a joke. Fidel Castro was absolutely terrible. All these dictators he's praising are terrible. A lot of them are socialists and communists. Basically what Bernie Sanders has identified himself throughout his career. Number 10, he indirectly self-identified himself as a communist before, so all the Republicans out there that are calling him a communist are not necessarily unfounded in some truth. In 1972, he said, "I don't care if people come up to me and call me a communist." He basically identified himself with communism more than he identified himself with capitalism, or dare I even say it, things like social democracy, which he'll push back on. But if you called him a communist back in the day, oh, he'd be all over it. He's like, yeah, I don't mind. You can call me a communist. He basically supports Marxist thought. He traffics in Marxist thought. And guess what, Bernie? Marxist thought, this distributist type of platform, this theft that he's pushing, this government dependency, it's anti-market, it's anti-American, and the American people are going to send you back to your third house in Vermont this November. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Please like this video, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media, join the Discord, donate to the Patreon, links in description. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Red Eagle, out.